After Ambassador Espericus left the port of Constantinople, he had such favorable weather that in a few days he reached the island of Sicily. He learned that the king was in the city of Messina, and he went there. When he was near the port, he dressed very well and had all his men put on their finery. Then he disembarked and went to the king's palace. When he was before the king, he bowed, and the king honored him and asked him the reason for his coming. The ambassador answered, "Most excellent sir, Trnt sends me to your majesty as an ambassador." He immediately gave the ambassador a very fine room, and he had everything he needed brought to him. He also sent beef of an ox and pork, and fresh bread to the galley for the men. On the morning of the following day, after the king had heard mass, he summoned his council, and when they were seated in a great hall, he told the ambassador to explain his mission. The ambassador said, "Most excellent sir, your excellency is aware that Trnt is carrying on a war for the Emperor of Constantinople against the Moorish Sultan and the Grand Turk. It happened that they took from the Emperor all the lands Trnt had conquered, and so he has decided to take the mightiest force he can to Constantinople. He begs your majesty to go with him personally with all your forces to help him carry out the conquest of the Empire of Greece. And since he has so much confidence in your lordship, he will be here very soon." The ambassador said no more. The king quickly replied, "Knight, it makes me very happy to know of the good fortune of my brother Trnt, and I am very pleased to be able to help him." The ambassador stood and thanked the king. When they left the parley, the king had letters drawn up to all the barons and knights of Sicily, and to all the cities and royal villas, that on a certain day they should send all their magistrates to the city of Palermo, because he had decided to hold a general parliament there. On the appointed day, the king and all those who were invited were in Palermo, and when the parliament opened, the king asked the entire kingdom for aid. They were all happy to give their assistance, and those who could decided to go with him. When the parliament was over, all who had decided to go quickly made ready, and in short time the king gathered 4,000 horses, and he had at his disposal a large fleet of ships and many provisions. Here the book ceases to speak of the king of Sicily, who is putting all his ships in order, and gathering all the provisions and the horses and arms, and it returns to the 6 ships Trnt had sent to Constantinople loaded with wheat. After the 6 ships had left the port of Constantine, they had such favorable wind that in a few days they reached the port of Valona, which is in Greece. There they received news that the Sultan and the Turks had passed the Bosphorus with many ships and galleys, and that they had sent for from Alexandria and Turkey, and that they had laid siege to the city of Constantinople. The emperor was extremely concerned, and all those in the city prayed continually to Jesus Christ to send Trnt so that they could be freed from their captivity. At the same time, they felt very confident because they were sure that Trnt was coming with all his forces. The princess returned to the emperor's palace to console her father, and she told him to gather courage, for our Lord would help them. The emperor had made Hippolytus his captain major, and every day he performed great acts of chivalry. If it had not been for him, the Sultan would have taken the city before Trnt had arrived. When the captains of the 6 ships learned that the Sultan's forces were about to fall on Constantinople, they sent a courier by land to the emperor, informing him that they were there in the port of Valona, but that they did not dare go on to aid his majesty out of fear of the Moorish army that was facing the city. However, they notified his majesty that Trnt had already left the city of Constantine, and that he was coming with great haste to assist him. In addition, they armed a brigantine and sent it to Trnt to warn him that the Turk and the Sultan had laid siege to the city of Constantinople. The brigantine left very secretly and steered for Sicily, and it had such favorable weather that in a few days it reached the port of Palermo. As soon as King Escriano had left Constantine, Trnt ordered all the horses, the food supplies, and the people brought together. The 30 ships stocked with wheat arrived, and when he had them filled with men, they were all on board. Trnt, the king of Fez, and Plesser de Mavia went on the ship, along with all the knights who had been on land with Trnt. When everything was ready, they sailed towards Sicily. When the brigantine had come from the port of Valona, saw Trant's fleet, it sailed out of the port and steered towards them, asking for the captain's ship, and it was pointed out to them. When the brigantine was next to the Trant ship, they told him that the 6 ships were in the port of Valona, and that they had not been able to pass by the Sultan's fleet, and of the siege that had been laid against the city. This made Trant very angry, and he sailed to the port of Palermo, where he saw the ships of the King of Sicily that had begun to celebrate with trumpets and bombards. Those of Trant answered them, and they raised such a din that it seemed as though the whole world was going to cave in. As soon as Trant's armada was in port and had laid anchor, the King of Sicily came on board Trant's ship, and there they embraced and kissed. The King of Sicily honored all the barons and knights who were on Trant's ship, and he kissed and embraced the King of Fez, and together they went on land together. Trant ordered that no one on the ship was to go on land, since he wanted to leave the following day. The King of Sicily had his queen come to the sea, and she honored Trant and the King of Fez, and the queen especially, when she heard that she had been the servant of so virtuous a lady as the princess. They all went to the palace together, with a great multitude of ladies and maidens and other people who followed them. When they were in the palace, a splendid meal was prepared for them, and they ate their fill with great pleasure from all sorts of victuals. When they had left their tables, Trant and the King of Sicily went into a chamber. The Queen of Sicily and the King of Fez, along with his wife, remained in the hall with many ladies and gentlemen, and they began to dance and entertain themselves. Trant told the King of Sicily about all the misfortunes he had suffered, and how afterwards our Lord had protected him and had given him a great victory, and how he had conquered all of Barbary. Then he told him of the condition the emperor was in, and that he needed their aid immediately. The King of Sicily answered him, "My brother and my lord, the horses and arms have been prepared, along with the most of the men." Trant answered, "My brother and lord, I beg you to have a proclamation sent out through the city that everyone shall gather, as you wish to depart this evening." The King of Sicily immediately sent one of his chamberlains, and the trumpeters went through the city, commanding all those who were to leave to gather together, and it was very quickly done. Trant and the king went back to the hall with the queen, and there they found a little diversion. The Queen of Sicily drew apart with the Queen of Fez and embraced her, asking her many questions about the princess, about her beauty, and about the love between Trant and the princess. The Queen of Fez praised the princess, saying she would never be able to tell of all her wonderful qualities. She passed lightly over the love affair with great discretion. Then she began to flatter the queen, an art at which she was a master, telling her that after her highness, the princess, she was without equal in the world, that she had never seen or heard of a lady with such a genteel mind or so much beauty as had her majesty, and that she was very much in love with her and her singular qualities, and she told her many other things, all of which gave the Queen of Sicily great pleasure. After the party and celebrations had ended, it was time to dine, and they ate with great satisfaction. When they had left the table, Trant begged the King of Sicily to make ready quickly, and the king told him he would. They took their leave of the Queen of Sicily and of all those who were staying with her. The King of Sicily entrusted the regency of the kingdom to a cousin german of the queen, who was Duke of Messina, a good and virtuous knight. He made him viceroy and put the queen and his entire household in his charge. When everything was done that was necessary, the king and Trant and all their company gathered together, and the entire fleet, Trant's as well as that of the King of Sicily, set sail. At the port of Valona, the 6 ships loaded with wheat were waiting, and they were very pleased when they saw Trant's fleet. Here the book ceases talking about Trant and continues with the story of King Escriano. As soon as King Escriano left Trant, he and his wife, the queen, rode until they came to his land, the kingdom of Ethiopia. After he had rested a few days, he called all the barons and knights of his kingdom to the city of Trogodita, and he told them, "It must have come to your knowledge that I was the prisoner of the captain of the Christians, Trnt LeBlanc. He is the best knight in the world, for he gave us our liberty and made us his companions in arms. Furthermore, he has given me as my wife the daughter of the king of Tremonson. Along with that kingdom, he has also given me the kingdom of Tunis. Now he must carry out the conquest of the Greek Empire for the Emperor of Constantinople, because the Sultan and the Grand Turk have taken away his entire empire. So he has called on me, as his brother and servant, to help him with all my power. Thus, I beg of all of you who are willing to come with me to Constantinople." One by one, they each responded that they loved him with a great love, and that they would follow him and die for him, not only in Constantinople, but to the ends of the world. King Escriano thanked them all. Then he sent messages to all the cities and towns of his kingdom, that all who wished to put themselves at his service, both cavalry and foot soldiers, citizens and foreigners, would come to the city of Trogodita. When they had all gathered there, King Escriano found that as a part of his army he had at his command 20,000 horsemen, strong and able with weapons. The queen also made ready, and they left the city of Trogodita with their entire army. Here the book returns to Trnt Leblanc's armada as they are going to Constantinople. When Trnt was at the port of Valona, he sent a galley into the port, and commanded the captains of the 6 ships to come out of the port and follow the armada. So they set sail and came out of the port and followed the fleet. When the armada was in the canal of Romania, it set its course for the port of Gigo, which is the port of Troy, where they waited for the rest of the armada to join them. Trnt held council with the king of Sicily and the king of Fez and all the other barons and knights, for he knew that the Sultan's entire armada was in the port of Constantinople, and that they had more than 300 vessels. It was decided to send a man overland who knew the Moorish language, and who would go into Constantinople at night to inform the emperor that Trnt and his entire armada were in the port of Troy, a little more than 100 miles from Constantinople. They did not want to give him any sort of letter, so that if he was taken prisoner by the Moors, they would not have any warning. So they would tell him everything he should say to the emperor. When the council was over, Trnt called a knight from Tunis who had been a Moor of the royal house. His name was Singerus, and he was a very ingenious and eloquent man and a valiant knight. He had been a captive in Constantinople, and he knew the area well. Trnt told him everything he was to say to the emperor and the princess, and he gave him his seal so the emperor would have faith in him. This knight dressed himself in Moorish fashion as a lackey. A brigantine picked him up, and at night they put him ashore a league from the Moorish camp, which was laying siege to the city of Constantinople. The knight carefully turned away from the encampment and set out for the city, but before he could escape, he fell into the hands of spies from the Moorish camp. He spoke to them very discreetly in their language, and told them he was one of them, and they let him pass. When he reached the city, the men who were guarding the gate seized him, thinking he was from the Moorish encampment. He told them not to harm him, because he was Trnt's ambassador, and that he was coming to talk to the emperor. The guards immediately took him to the emperor, who, at that moment, was getting up from the dinner table. When Singerus was before the emperor, he knelt and kissed his hand and foot, and gave him Trnt's seal. The emperor looked at it and recognized Trnt's coat of arms. Then the emperor embraced him, telling him that he was very welcome. Singerus said, "Most excellent sire, I was sent here by that great captain, Trnt Leblanc, who commends himself in grace and mercy to your majesty, for soon, with the help of God our Lord, he will free you from all your enemies. In addition, he begs you to put all your cavalry in order, and have the city well guarded, for tomorrow he will attack the Moorish armada, and he fears that when the Moors see their squadron lost, they will mount a powerful attack against the city. Trnt is coming with enough might to take them, and he kill them all, and of this your majesty should not have the slightest of doubt." "Friend," said the emperor, "we feel very relieved by what you have told us. May our Lord grant us the grace that it will be as you have said. For we have so much trust in the great virtue and chivalry of Trnt, that with the help of God he will fulfill our good desire and his own." The emperor immediately summoned Hippotlis, his high captain, and when he was before him, he said, "Our captain, you know that Trnt is in the port of Troy with a great squadron. He has decided to attack the Moorish army tomorrow morning, and so it is very important that you quickly call all the cavalry in the city, and all the constables and captains of the foot soldiers, and that you have your men ready in case the Moors decide to attack the city." After the ambassador Singerus had explained his mission, he asked the emperor's permission to go pay reverence to the empress and the princess, and the emperor gave him consent. When he had received permission, he went to the empress's chambers, where he found her daughter with all the ladies. The knight bowed to the empress and kissed her hand, and then the princess's hand. Then kneeling, he said, "Ladies, my captain and lord Trnt LeBlanc sends me to kiss your hands, and he offers to come here very soon to pay his respects to you." When the princess heard that Trnt was coming, and that he was so close, she became so happy that she nearly fainted. For some time she seemed delirious with happiness. When she had recovered, the empress and the princess rejoiced with the ambassador. They asked him about many things, especially what men were coming in Trnt's company. The ambassador answered that the king of Sicily was coming with him with all his forces, and the king of Fez with all his forces, and with his wife, the queen, whose name was Placer de Mavia. And all the barons of the kingdoms of Tunis and Tremonson were coming. Many other knights who had accepted payment for their services were coming from Spain, France, and Italy, because of the great fame and renown of Trnt. And also that magnanimous King Escriano, the lord of Ethiopia, was coming overland. "He is coming with a mighty army of men on foot and on horseback, and he is bringing his wife, the queen, with him. She is very desirous of seeing your excellency, princess, because of the great beauty she has heard attributed to you. For this queen is one of the most beautiful women in the world, and possesses all the virtues." He also told them how Placer de Mavia had married Lord Argument, and that she was coming to her majesty, so his majesty the emperor and the ladies would honor her for the wedding. He explained to them at length how Trnt had carried out the conquest of Barbary, and how he had given away all that he had conquered and won, and had kept nothing, that everyone who saw him or heard of him adored him. He told them many other virtuous and praiseworthy things about Trnt, which neither ink nor words would suffice to describe.